I'm 34 and cleared my condo debt. We're taking your condo, sister declared at 3:12 a.m. She attempted to break in. I called 911 and pressed charges. So, I'm 34, single, work in IT. Pretty normal life, right? My parents live close by, in the same suburb where my sister, Phoebe, and I grew up. Phoebe, she's 30, married to Bennett, and they have a 2-year-old daughter. She was always the golden child, the one teachers adored and neighbors praised. When we were kids, I'd be out mowing lawns in the summer while Phoebe focused on her studies. My parents never meant to play favorites, but if something broke, it was somehow my fault. If Phoebe needed anything, the whole family would just move mountains for her. Just 3 months ago, I finally paid off my 3-bedroom condo in Chicago. Nothing fancy, trust me, but it was mine. Every single creaky floorboard, every scuffed wall, held a story. That secondhand fridge that groaned every time it kicked on? Mine. The cheap dining table I assembled wrong so it wobbled if you leaned on it? Mine. I even converted a closet into a tiny office because I couldn't afford a bigger place. For years, this condo was the finish line I crawled towards. I skipped vacations, drove a car that was practically old enough to vote, and learned to fix leaky sinks from YouTube tutorials instead of calling a plumber. While my friends were out at bars on weekends, I was doing DoorDash after work for extra money. So when the bank finally sent me that letter saying my mortgage was paid in full, I swear, it felt like the biggest victory of my entire life. I even stuck it on my fridge with a dumb cow magnet. That's why, when Phoebe showed up out of nowhere on a Tuesday afternoon, I genuinely thought she was coming to congratulate me. She rarely visits alone. Usually, she brings our parents or Bennett along. But this time, it was just her, standing in my doorway, holding a massive iced coffee and looking like she already owned the place. "Hey," I said, stepping back, a little surprised. She just walked right in, not a word, her eyes scanning everything like she was inspecting a rental apartment. She peeked into the second bedroom, the bathroom, my tiny closet office. Then she paused in the kitchen, hands on her hips. "This place is bigger than I remember," she finally admitted. Thanks," I said, confused. She just nodded, like she'd confirmed something profound in her head. Then she turned to me, dead serious. "We agreed this place should belong to the family now." I just blinked at her. "Excuse me? A family place?" She repeated it, slower, as if I was the one who wasn't getting it. "It's ridiculous for you to keep all this room to yourself when Bennett and I have a baby, and rent is impossible. We'll be moving in. You can find somewhere else." She said it so casually, so matter-of-factly, like she was announcing the weather. I actually laughed. What else can you do when someone says something so utterly insane? But Phoebe didn't laugh back. She just crossed her arms and raised an eyebrow, like I was the weird one. "Wait, are you serious?" I asked. "Of course," she answered. "Mom and Dad agree. It's the best thing for everyone. It's not like you need all this room, it's just you." I looked around my small condo, wondering if she'd somehow discovered a secret ballroom I never knew existed. "You're kidding, right? You don't just decide to move into my place." Phoebe rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. It's a family home now. You'll understand once you have kids." That made me laugh even harder. "Phoebe, this is not a family home. I bought it, I paid for it, and it is mine." She just waved her hand, as if that was a minor, irrelevant detail. "Yeah, but come on. It's not fair for you to keep it when we need the space more. You can get an apartment somewhere, something small. You don't even use the second bedroom." I didn't say anything. I'd heard some wild stories from my family before, but this was a whole new level of audacity. "You've already talked to Mom and Dad about this?" I finally asked. "Of course," she replied, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "They think it makes total sense." "And do they also think I'm just going to hand over my keys and start packing?" Phoebe sighed, like I was being completely unreasonable. "Look, we're not trying to fight. It's just what's best for everyone. Bennett's hours got cut. Daycare costs keep going up, and you're sitting here with 3 bedrooms and no kids. It's kind of selfish, don't you think?" I just stared at her. Selfish? Because I worked extra hours, skipped dinners out, and scraped by so I could have a stable place to live? And now I was selfish for not sharing it? Phoebe grabbed her coffee from the counter, like the conversation was over. We'll need to move in by the end of next month, which gives you time to find a place. She was already heading for the door before I could even process what was happening. Phoebe, I said, finally catching up. You're not moving in here. She paused, her hand on the doorknob, and just smiled. You know that smile? The one that says, you'll change your mind eventually? We've already talked to Mom and Dad, she said, then she just walked out. I stood in the middle of my living room, staring at the door that had just shut. The fridge kicked on behind me, letting out its familiar groan. I looked over at the mortgage letter, still hanging there with the cow magnet. For a split second, I actually wondered if I'd imagined the whole thing. But no, Phoebe was serious. And my parents were apparently involved. I wasn't angry yet, not really. Just off balance, like the floor had tilted slightly, and I was waiting to see if it would keep going. After Phoebe left, I stood there for a long time, just staring at the door. It didn't open again. I sat down, opened my laptop, and tried to concentrate on work, but my thoughts kept returning to her words. A family asset. Like she and Bennett had the authority to make that decision for me. To really get how we got here, I should probably tell you the backstory. This didn't start yesterday. I've been working since I was 17, bussing tables at a greasy diner. Minimum wage, plus tips that rarely came. Then summer shifts at the hardware store, a part-time job at the campus library during college. By the time I graduated, I developed a habit: take any extra hour you can get. I spent a long time living cheap, studio apartment with a view of a brick wall, furnished from Craigslist. Meanwhile, Phoebe was living a completely different life. She's 4 years younger. My parents paid for her cheer camp, her driving lessons, her prom dress, all while telling me they were short on money when I needed new brakes for my car. Phoebe was known as the golden child. Teachers loved her. Neighbors showered her with affection. When she forgot assignments, my parents would say, "Oh, she's just tired." When I got a B instead of an A, they'd ask why I hadn't studied more. She wasn't evil or anything, but she was just used to things going her way. When I was in college, she got into a private university with tuition that made my stomach hurt. My parents co-signed her loans without blinking. I went to a state school on scholarships and juggling part-time jobs. She studied communications, posted photos from tailgate parties, spring break, trendy coffee shops. I spent my nights in the library, trying to finish projects before my 5 a.m. alarm to unload trucks at a warehouse. When I bought the condo 6 years ago, it was the cheapest decent 3-bedroom I could find in a stable neighborhood. It needed work, peeling paint, old appliances, floors that squeaked, but it was all mine. I remember signing the papers with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, terrified of screwing it up. Phoebe stopped by once, walked through, wrinkling her nose. "It's cozy," she said, which, you know, is a nice way to say small. "It's what I can afford," I told her. She just smiled, like she was humoring me. "I mean, I could never live somewhere like this, but good for you." That stuck with me. I worked extra shifts on weekends, fixing other people's laptops, lived on instant noodles, skipped buying decent clothes for years just to own a place, and my sister treated it like some starter apartment she was too good for. Fast forward to when she married Bennett. He's a quiet guy, teaches middle school science. We were always polite, but never really talked much. They rented a nice 2-bedroom apartment, not far from me, a newer building with a gym and a rooftop deck, much nicer than my condo. They had a baby last year. Cute kid. I sent gifts, paid visits, tried to be a good uncle. Then, the cracks started to show. Daycare costs went up. Bennett's hours got cut. Phoebe decided to quit her part-time marketing job to stay home. Money issues started creeping into conversations. Little comments about bills and rent. I assumed they'd downsize, like most people do when expenses get too high. Instead, Phoebe shows up at my door, claiming my condo is now family property because we share DNA. I wasn't surprised my parents supported her. The difference now is, this isn't a family toy everyone can borrow. This is the one thing I worked hard for, and Phoebe suddenly believed she could just walk in and take it. And, as always, Mom and Dad were backing her up. But here's the thing. I'm not a kid anymore. I'm not staying in their house, eating their food, or borrowing their car. I pay my own bills. I keep my own place clean. I finally have something solid beneath my feet. And to be honest, hearing Phoebe call it selfish for me to keep the place I paid for triggered a feeling in my chest I hadn't felt before. Sure, I was angry, but I was also just stubborn. And I had no idea I had that in me. Because this time, it wasn't about sharing toys or getting a ride to school. I wasn't giving up my home. The calls started the very next morning. First, Mom. "Sweetie, I heard you were a little tense yesterday," she said, in that voice people use when they're about to lecture you, but pretend not to. "Am I tense?" I asked. Phoebe explained what happened. You have to look at it from her perspective. They have a baby right now. Renting is impossible. Mom, she showed up and announced she was moving into my home like it was already decided. Nobody asked me anything. She probably assumed you'd help out. The family helps each other. That's what we do. I told her I wasn't agreeing to anything, and she sighed, like I'd just admitted to being a supervillain. You don't even use the second bedroom, she informed me. And it's just sitting there while they struggle. It doesn't seem fair. I repeated that it wasn't happening. She said we'd talk more at dinner on Sunday. I had no idea there was a dinner on Sunday. Around lunchtime, my phone buzzed again. This time, my father delivered the same speech, but with that disappointed tone, like I'd broken some sacred family rule. He said things like, "Step up and look at the bigger picture." I reminded him I wasn't the one asking someone else to give up their home. He told me not to be dramatic. Then I got a text from an aunt I hadn't seen in over a year. "Honey, they just need a break. You can get another place later." As if people have spare condos in their back pockets. By that evening, Phoebe had texted a lengthy message about how this was only temporary and for the benefit of the family. She even attached a spreadsheet Bennett created, showing how much money they'd save by moving in with me. It listed no rent, half-priced utilities, no HOA or repair fees. As if the place would just keep itself alive out of kindness. I didn't reply. Instead, I went to my complex's public website. They listed standard lease terms, early termination costs, 4 months rent. My eyebrows shot up. So, this wasn't just about wanting more room. This was about avoiding a bill. A few hours later, I called my friend Tyler, who works at a local real estate office. I asked him general questions about rental applications, recent denials, credit scores. He mentioned there had been a lot lately: high debt, missed payments, deteriorating credit scores. He didn't name anyone, of course, but I started connecting the dots on my own. I didn't tell Mom or Dad about this. No point yet. Another call came in Friday afternoon. Mom again. "We're having a family dinner on Sunday," she said. "Everyone will be there. We can talk this through calmly." I knew exactly how those dinners went. A table full of relatives, all nodding along as someone tells you you're being unreasonable. The voices stay polite until you cave. It's like an intervention, but with lasagna. Still, I said fine, I'd go. Saturday evening, Phoebe texted again. "We need to be out of here in 5 weeks. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Who's making it easier? I found myself wondering. I didn't reply. Sunday arrived. I drove to my parents' house after lunch. It was the same house where we grew up. Same peeling wallpaper in the hallway, same couch that sank in the middle because Dad refused to replace it. When I walked in, the aroma of garlic bread hit me first. The table was already set. Phoebe and Bennett sat together on one side, like a panel waiting to question me. My parents were hovering in the kitchen. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Phoebe smiled, a fake, polite smile she only used when she was about to ask for something big. "Hey, we're just about to eat." The moment I sat down, I knew their plan. Bennett looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. Mom and Dad kept giving each other silent nods, like they had a script ready to go. Phoebe began. "We only need the condo for a year," she said softly, like she was doing me a favor by setting a timeline. "A year?" I asked. "Well, maybe less," she replied quickly. "It depends on how quickly we get back on our feet." I didn't respond. She pushed the folder of papers closer to me again. Bennett cleared his throat. "Phoebe and I worked out a plan. budget, timeline, everything. It's very organized. We'd cover utilities. Obviously, we wouldn't pay rent because you already own the place. Utilities? I inquired, flipping through the pages. That's it? Phoebe nodded generously. Mom leaned in closer. Honey, it's only temporary. Think about the baby. She needs her own room. You rent a 2-bedroom now, I said, looking at Phoebe. It's too expensive, she stated flatly. So, get a smaller place. She did not like that. Her jaw tightened. Why should we uproot everything when you have space just sitting there unused? Because it's my home, I said, staring at her. Dad sighed, setting down his fork like he was about to deliver wisdom from the mountain. This is about family working together. You have the room. They have the need. It's common sense. I pointed to the papers in front of me. You wrote this, as if I already agreed. Did anyone think to actually ask me first? Silence. Phoebe finally said, we figured you'd be reasonable once you saw the numbers. I navigated to the so-called budget page. There are no HOA fees listed. No repairs. Utilities are cut in half, as if electricity bills are based on vibrations. Rent is $0. I pushed the folder back towards her. Not happening. Her fake smile broke. Why not? You don't even use the 2nd bedroom. That doesn't matter, I said. It's just sitting there while we're drowning in bills, she said, her voice rising slightly. And you have extra space you don't need. It's selfish. There it was again. Selfish. As if the years I worked double shifts, ate instant noodles, and refused vacations to pay off this place didn't count. I shifted back in my chair. I looked at your lease. Phoebe went completely still. What? It's public, I responded. Bennett shifted uncomfortably. For month's rent if you break it early, right? That's what this is really about, isn't it? Phoebe's cheeks turned crimson. That's none of your business, she snapped. You're making it my business, I said, keeping my voice level. You want to move into my home to avoid paying penalties on yours. Be honest about it. Mom was scowling. Is that true? Phoebe looked at me like I'd just betrayed her deepest secret. We just need a fresh start. Why are you making this so hard? Because you showed up and announced you were moving in like I had no say. I shot back. Like my years of work don't matter because you want an easy out. Bennett finally spoke, his voice low. Look, we're just trying to find a solution that works for everyone. For everyone, or for you too? I inquired. He didn't reply. Phoebe looked at her mother, desperate. Tell him this makes sense. You know it does. Mom paused, then added, Honey, they do have the baby to think about. I ended the conversation with her. Then maybe they should have planned better, instead of showing up here with fake budgets and expecting me to hand over my keys. Phoebe slammed her hand against the table. We're family. Family helps each other. Family also respects each other, I explained. You don't get to decide my home isn't mine anymore because you made bad financial choices. Eventually, Dad spoke out. All right, let's calm down. No, I said, standing up. You all sat here, ready to guilt-trip me, like I'm the bad guy for not giving up the one thing I've worked for. I'm not doing it. Phoebe's voice was shaking. So, you'd rather see us homeless than help? You rent a 2-bedroom apartment, I retorted. Sell the furniture, break the lease, move to a cheaper place. People do it all the time. But you're not moving in here. Mom was staring at her. You don't mean that. I do, I answered. This is no longer a debate, Phoebe said, her face red. Bennett stared at the table as if the wood grain was the most fascinating thing in the world. I grabbed my jacket. Thanks for dinner, I said, heading for the door. Good luck with your lease. Nobody bothered me as I walked away. I overheard Phoebe saying something to Mom about how cold-hearted I was. I didn't look back. After that dinner, the family chorus began. Phoebe says we can still work this out. Mom puts her family first. Dad's larger picture. Even an uncle I hadn't seen in over a year commented, she has a baby. You don't. I just didn't respond anymore. I hadn't changed my mind. 10 days passed. One night after work, I came home and noticed something by the door. Fine scratches near the lock. A low scuff mark on the wood, like it had been lightly kicked. I ran my finger over the scratches. It could have been nothing, but I'd lived there for 6 years. I knew every squeak and dent. This wasn't there before. My stomach felt heavy. I went inside, locked the door, and sat at my laptop. I filled out the city's online non-emergency report form. Just the basics: possible tampering, no entry, no suspects. Clicked submit, received the confirmation, closed the laptop. The next day, I installed a drill-resistant deadbolt and 2 cameras, a door viewer facing the hallway, and a small, motion-activated cam inside to cover the entry. Both recorded in high definition and sent alerts to my phone. It didn't cost much. If I was right about who was lurking around, it would be well worth the money. Nothing happened for 3 nights. The cameras stayed silent. Still, I checked the feeds before bed. Turned up the volume on my phone in case an alert came through. On the 4th night, it happened. 3:12 a.m. I was jolted awake by my phone buzzing on my nightstand. Motion detected at your door. My heart pounded. I grabbed the phone and launched the app. The grainy black and white feed revealed a figure standing at my door. Phoebe. Her hood was up, hair sticking out, shoulders hunched. She was holding something shiny in her hand, moving it around the lock. I could feel my chest tighten. I hit the record button on the app, swung my legs out of bed, and called 911. "Someone's trying to break into my condo," I whispered to the dispatcher. "I have video." I gave the address. I stayed on the line, watching. Phoebe kept working the lock as if she knew I wasn't home. The building's hallway lights came on, automatic timer. She froze for half a second, looked over her shoulder, then went right back to jiggling the lock. The dispatcher informed me units were approaching and told me to stay put. I watched through the phone screen, my heart hammering. A minute later, 2 cops appeared on the hallway camera, walking quickly. Phoebe didn't even notice them until they were almost on top of her. I stayed behind the door until the officers were down the hall. When they told her to back away, I opened up and showed them the live feed of her with the tool at the lock. The cops asked for ID. She stammered, said she'd forgotten her keys. I showed them the app recording, which clearly showed her with the screwdriver. They detained her right there in the hallway, handcuffed with red wrists and everything. I wasn't arrogant in that moment. I wasn't even angry. Just tired. And shaky, like my body hadn't quite caught up with my mind yet. They asked if I wanted to press charges. I said yes. One cop stayed to take my statement while the other escorted Phoebe away. Bennett arrived 7 minutes later, his hair messy, sweatpants on. He looked like he'd sprinted over. "What's going on?" he inquired, his voice cracking. "She attempted to break in," I said flatly. Bennett looked at the cop first, then at me. "There's a misunderstanding." She had a spare from earlier. I abruptly cut him off. "I never handed her a spare." "She thought she still had one," he said weakly. "She didn't," I said. Bennett just rubbed his face. He stopped arguing after that, just mumbled something about getting a lawyer, and followed the cops out. I locked the door behind them, double-checked the deadbolt, and sat on the couch for quite some time, staring at nothing. The cameras kept recording until the hallway was quiet again. I took a few hours off work the morning after Phoebe was arrested. I wanted to get everything documented before people started calling me names again. First, the police station. I handed over the video files. They said they'd get the 911 audio from dispatch. One of the officers assigned me a case number and stated that the video made things pretty clear. They'd filed the report, send it to the prosecutor, and I'd receive updates. When I got home, I made 2 copies of everything, one on a thumb drive, one in a secure cloud folder. I printed the incident report and kept it in a folder with my mortgage documents. Then I emailed my boss, informing him I'd be late due to a personal security incident. That's all I said. He responded, "Handle what you need to. Thanks for informing me." I left it at that. By noon, my phone was ringing nonstop. Mom came first. "How could you do this to your sister?" she said sharply. "She tried to break into my condo at 2:30 in the morning," I calmly replied. "I didn't do this." "She did. You didn't have to call the police," Mom said, as if there had been a better option. "She had a screwdriver in my lock." "What exactly did you want me to do?" "Open the door and serve her coffee." "Family should handle things privately," Mom insisted. "Does privately mean pretending it never happened?" I inquired. She didn't respond to that question. 3 hours later, Dad called. Same tone, different words. "She has a baby," he stated. She made a mistake. Don't ruin her life over it. She made her own decisions, I said. I was sleeping in my own home. I'm not apologizing for protecting it. He said something about me being cold. I hung up before I said anything I might regret. By evening, my aunt had texted. She didn't mean it, just dropped the charges. I ignored it. 3 days later, a neighbor brought up an old fraud case. Court records showed a deferred sentence and probation from years ago. This new arrest didn't violate active probation, but it would result in a new conviction on top of a previous case. I checked it out later. Court records are public if you know where to look. Phoebe had a minor fraud charge from 6 years ago, deferred sentence, probation, fine. Nothing major, but it was there. I didn't mention it anywhere. I didn't tell my cousins. I didn't go on a huge rant online. I responded to the prosecutor's questions, emailed the footage when they requested it, and kept everything boring and professional. Phoebe's case progressed quickly. They booked her on misdemeanor charges from the break-in attempt, and her prior record didn't help. She pleaded guilty to avoid a larger mess. The judge gave her a 4-month sentence and a criminal record that wouldn't be expunged. This time, Bennett messaged me while she was inside. A lengthy paragraph about how stressed they'd been. Daycare costs, medical bills, exorbitant rent, life moving too quickly. He explained Phoebe was simply trying to do what parents do, maintain a roof over their children's heads. I read it twice, saved it, and didn't reply. Their financial situation deteriorated dramatically after that. They were still under a fixed-term lease. When they broke it, they faced a 4-month penalty. Following that, they took a short month-to-month elsewhere, and the rate rose. Bennett was carrying the entire thing on a teacher's salary because Phoebe wasn't working and now had a record. Phoebe got out 4 months later. Mom told me they'd moved in with her and Dad for a while. That is between you and them, I said. It's no longer my business. Mom didn't like that response. She mentioned the house was tense. Phoebe and Bennett were arguing about bills. Dad detested the noise. Mom tried to keep the peace. I stayed away from it. 6 weeks later, I saw my father in person. He stopped by my condo to deliver some mail that had been addressed to them. He looked tired. Your sister's having a rough time, he said. She made her choices, I finally said. She says you hate her now. I don't hate her, I replied. But I'm tired of being the person everyone relies on and calls selfish. He didn't argue or defend her. Instead, he just nodded slowly, handed me the mail, and left. That was the last meaningful conversation we had about it. Life returned to normal for me faster than I expected. I maintained the same routine. Work in the mornings, gym in the evenings, fixed the sticky window in my living room on a Saturday, and finally painted the patchy wall in the hallway with cheap rollers and way too much blue tape. Little things I'd wanted to do for years. Later, my mother informed me that Phoebe wanted to clear the air. My first thought was that she intended to yell at me. My second thought was that she would probably want something else. I didn't contact them. Instead, I mailed them just one thing, a framed photograph of my front door with a new lock installed. A short note written underneath it, I hope you find a place that is truly yours. No swearing, no insults. Just clarity. 2 weeks later, Mom called. Phoebe wants to talk, she stated carefully, as if I were a wild creature she didn't want to startle. About what? I questioned. She wants to apologize. Does this apology come before or after she asks for something? I wondered. There was silence on the line. I'll meet her, I said, finally. But here's the deal. My home is off the table. Nobody shows up uninvited. If she can't agree to that, I'm not coming. Mom consented. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday at their house. Mom claimed it was neutral ground. When I arrived, Phoebe was already sitting at the kitchen table, arms crossed and chin up. Bennett sat next to her, looking like he wanted to disappear into his chair. I took a seat across from them. All right, I said. You wanted to talk? Go ahead. Phoebe didn't waste any time. You didn't have to call the cops, she said, her tone sharp. Family doesn't do that to each other. I looked at her. You attempted to break into my home. I was desperate, she explained, as if that made it okay. You wouldn't listen. You left us no choice. There was a choice, I explained. You could have found another apartment, like normal people. She waved a hand. Do you know how hard it is with a baby with bills? We needed help. You wanted a free house, I replied with disdain. We deserved help, she snarled. You don't have kids. You don't understand what it's like. All that space going to waste while we were drowning. I could feel my jaw tighten. Space I worked for. Space I paid for while you were calling it small and laughing at it 6 years ago. Phoebe looked at me with a grimace. Oh, come on. That was different. No, I said calmly. You treated this place like it was nothing until you needed it. Then you decided it was yours. Not asked. Decided. You could have just let us stay a few months, she replied. But no, you had to make it this big thing. Pressing charges. Really? You ruined my record. You ruined your record, I corrected. You picked up that screwdriver and arrived at 3:12 a.m. Not me. Phoebe leaned forward, her eyes sharp. You think you're better than us because you have a condo and no responsibilities? You think working a few extra hours makes you some kind of hero? I cracked a small smile. No. I think it makes me the person who owns the place you tried to steal. Her face went red. We just needed a break. And I needed boundaries, I stated. Now I have them. She started to speak, but I continued. You showed up uninvited. You ignored every no I gave you. You tried to break in, and now you're mad at me because there were consequences. Bennett finally spoke, his voice low. She just means it didn't have to go this far. It went as far as she pushed it, I answered. I'm not carrying that for her. Phoebe glared at me, fists tight on the table. One day, you'll need help. Don't expect us to be there. I took a deep breath. Good. That way, we're all clear. She blinked, like she didn't expect that response. I hope you figure things out, I commented. But my home is off limits. Forever. No debates, no surprises. We're done here. I left before she could respond. Weeks passed afterwards. Mom tried several more times to get everyone together for a family dinner. I repeatedly told her the same thing. If my home comes up, even once, I'm leaving. She said she understood. I just followed my routine. Work, gym, minor repairs around the condo. I purchased some cheap plants for the windowsill and upgraded my desk chair. Finally, life felt quiet. One afternoon, a cousin mentioned Phoebe had picked up a part-time job at a daycare. Bennett requested extra tutoring hours at school. After a few months, they found a small rental property further from the city. A cheaper, older location, but it was theirs. I didn't contact them. Not angry, just done. 18 months later, the condo looked better than it ever had. Fresh paint on every wall, not just the hallway this time. Both doors had new locks. The squeaky floorboard near the bedroom? Finally fixed after years of promising myself I'd get around to it. I bought a decent couch, got rid of the lumpy one I'd been hanging on to since college. Picked up a used rug that, for once, didn't clash with the curtains. Even the closet office looked better. I mounted a real shelf instead of stacking everything on milk crates. The plants by the windowsill were still alive, somehow. A couple even had new leaves. I watered them on schedule, gave them good sunlight, talked to them sometimes when I was bored. Coming home felt different now. Not because the place looked nice, but because it was truly mine in a way it hadn't been before. I'd open the door after work, hear the deadbolt click behind me, and feel it in my shoulders. The weight of the last year just gone. No surprise visitors, no guilt trips, no phone calls telling me I was selfish. The quiet wasn't lonely. It was steady. For the first time in a long time, I could actually sit on my couch with the TV off. No noise, no drama, and just breathe in my own space without wondering what fight was coming next. Peace. Not victory, not revenge, just boundaries that stayed where I put them. And for me, that was everything. So, tell me, what would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to draw such a hard line with family, and how did it turn out? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts.